You're listening to the Voices of Recovery podcast. This is a special episode featuring a recovering addict. Hi, my name is Sophie X. I'm the host and producer of the Voices of Recovery podcast. We're joined here today by Katherine. Hi, Katherine.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for doing the readings for the Just for Today and for This Bad.
Anytime.
So appreciate you. And you are on our special series about teen recovery, and youth. And first of all, I know our listeners would like to get to know the woman behind the voice. Our listeners have heard your voice for the first couple of days of September, and now your episode is being released. So who is Katherine? First of all, how long have you been clean?
Yeah, that's a great place to start because that is a big part of who I am. And so I got clean June 7th, 2006, which is pretty hard to describe how that feels, being clean over 19 years now.
That's more than half your life.
More than half my life, yes. I am currently 35 years old. So for any of you who are bad at math, I got clean when I was 16 years old. And I think when it comes to describing who I am, it's been such a big part of changing the trajectory of where I most likely would have ended up and the paths I've pursued since getting clean, and being, abstinent versus being in recovery, being in recovery versus being abstinent, the times that I was really in the step work of Narcotics Anonymous and the times that I was loitering with the intent to recover have definitely shown different seasons very clearly in my story.
Being clean at 16, but there are some listeners who are very young and who are like, how am I going to go through, my teens and my 20s clean? And you did that as a young woman, doing that and making that decision and, having to be the odd man out of your group of friends who are most likely using, right?
Yeah, so I'm glad you're doing this topic because it is something I'm very passionate about, and I feel that my higher power has put me in the position to kind of have this discussion over and over and give a public service announcement, if you will. When getting clean at 16 and being in treatment around other teenagers, I didn't feel so odd, but there was a general haze of what happens when we get out of treatment. How do we go back to high school? How do we experience college? And then there's always this joke and like really funny reference to like, what am I going to do at my wedding when they pour champagne and everyone toasts? And it's like, dude, you're 16. Like, why are we talking about a wedding? And I know other people at different ages can relate to that thought of like, how do I go to a wedding? And it's like, we're not even invited to a wedding. Why are we talking about this? But it's really human to project. I had some people when I first started going to meetings, and I tried a few different fellowships at first just because of the nature of where I was and what was available during the times I was like allowed out of the facility. And I found my home in Narcotics Anonymous, probably because I didn't get as many comments as I did at other fellowships. Where people said, I've had more drinks than you've been alive, and years you've been alive. I was just getting started at your age. How could you possibly be getting clean at this age? And then there are some more kind of backhanded comments about, are you really sure you're done? Are you sure that it wasn't just a bad habit or you partied too hard? And I'm really glad I was given the suggestion of listening to feelings and not situations, because I couldn't relate to being, divorced and losing a career and having my car repoed. I didn't have any of that in my life as a teenager. But when I heard people share about the desperation and the isolation and the obsession and compulsion and waking up every day saying, I can't do this anymore, being suicidal. Like that's the sharing portion that made me feel really connected and helped me know I was in the right place. And you know, I also recognized from older members around me that had more insight and cared a little more about how their words would land. They would express to me, people in their 40s and 50s and 60s just getting clean see you and experience a lot of regret.
Mm.
So they say things that they probably really don't mean to say, but the shame and the regret is coming out. Because the truth is, a lot of people that I've heard share talk about starting to get high 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. A lot of other people around 15, 16. So it's really not, it shouldn't be so shocking that somebody gets high and clean in adolescence and teenage years when you think about how many people tend to start around that age.
Yeah, pretty much everyone that I've interviewed so far had said, "Oh, my first drink was when I was 10. I
Mm-hmm.
was, 12 when I stuck a needle in my arm for the first time."
Right.
So saying at a young age, this is my choice. I'm choosing to not do that anymore because my life became so unmanageable. Shouldn't seem very surprising. But you're right. So many addicts had experienced most of their teens and 20s and some of their 30s and 40s and 50s high. So for them to look at somebody making that very mature decision to say, "No, I'm going to get clean," is a big deal. I can most definitely see how people can react poorly to that because they didn't know what it was like to make that decision at that age, and it takes a significant amount of maturity to make that decision. So good on you for doing that. But you were brought to that decision for a reason.
Yeah. And our literature talks about this over and over again. You know, yes, some of it was maturity, more of it was desperation. And even more than that, it was really higher power intervention. Because we don't get clean on our own and we don't stay clean on our own. And it's nothing short of a miracle to stay clean. There was a voice in my head, if you will, that came in towards the end of my active addiction and some interaction with Nassau County Police Department that I was in a situation where a police officer made the comment of, do you want to make this easier? Do you want to make this hard? And it was really funny because I've heard so many people say, my spiritual awakening wasn't the clouds parted and sun came out, but I remember it being like a really beautiful day. And I looked behind this police officer and saw like the sky was really blue and the sun was out. And it was honestly the first time I noticed in a really long time that like the world was bigger than my getting high and getting the next one. And this question of, do you want to make it easier? Do you want to make it hard? Like I didn't have a choice when I was getting high. It was just about getting more. There were, that's the thing about obsession and compulsion, the choice is taken away. Um, so, I just kind of looked at this guy and was like, man, do I? And can I? Can I stop making this hard? Do I want to take the easy route? And I'm air quoting easy, right? Because stopping was not easy. But I also knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. And I also just want to say one more thing about the, getting clean as a teenager and having these comments made by, people a little older than myself at the time. I think a lot of people have the experience of, well, it was still fun then. For me, it was fun. And then it very quickly was not fun. It became a full time job. And I went from this great relief, and I used to joke around, cocaine was the love of my life. Like this relief that I got when I was high of all the pain and shame and rejection and fear and insecurity, all that went away and out the window. And then very, very quickly, because of the fast nature of like the progression, um, I was not having fun and I couldn't recognize myself. And all the people that I was quote unquote partying with stopped hanging out with me because I was somebody who walked around with zero morals and principles, stealing from my family, breaking their trust, stealing peace of mind. Um, my parents almost got divorced when I was getting high because of the manipulation and the way I'd play them against each other and the tension it created in the household because one was in denial and the other person wasn't. And the one who wasn't in denial was abusing things themselves. So they didn't really have a leg to stand on. And I used all of that to get my way. The self-centeredness piece is just really astronomical when I get high. And um, I think that I knew I was going to die. And I want to be really clear about that as well. When people would ask me, "Are you sure you're not too young to stay clean?" There was a gentleman at a meeting once who said, "I can't believe people ask you that because you sure as shit are not too young to die."
Mm-hmm.
And it was so validating when I heard him say that because I knew I was on the road of self-destruction.
Jails, institutions, and death. We say it all the time.
Right,
It's the surefire nature of this disease, right? You're
right.
going to end up locked up, a ward of the state, or dead.
Yeah. And at that time, the juvenile delinquents like myself that I was hanging out with, like I had people getting arrested around me at 13 years old. And I had people doing drugs that, I didn't even know what the consequences of them were. And I became that person who just started saying yes to everything because the drugs weren't working the same after a few years. I was chasing that first high. I was chasing that relief of feelings because I had no idea how to manage my emotions.
And you bring up a very important point about how people who are older can push people away from recovery because of their age. Like, you're too young to recover. Go out there, have fun. Like, you're pushing them towards jails, institutions, and death, right? If you see a person who is a young man, woman, what have you, making that decision to get clean, you should encourage that, right? Because if you are an addict and you're in the right place, you're preventing yourself from one of those three avenues, right?
Yeah. I think we have a responsibility to fan the flame of desire. And that is a big part of service. And that is the meat and potatoes of our 12th step. So, again, I don't think a lot of people were intentionally like, let me say this so this person stops coming to meetings. But yes, that is a big reality when you keep reminding somebody that they're young. Oh, you probably just partied too hard. You do tend to push them towards the door. And that being said, there's so many excuses our disease can give us. We don't really need help with anymore. And at the other end of the spectrum, like I've never seen someone come in and someone say, "Are you sure you're not too old to be getting clean?
Right.
You've already lived most of your life." Like, could you imagine if someone said that? Like, "Ooh, you're 70. I don't know. You might as well drink through retirement." Like, we don't, like, nobody says that, right? So, like, it's really wild to me that it's like people say this on the other end. So I say all that to say, like, please be conscious of your words and really like what's going on for you that you need to pick apart somebody's age and pick apart and ask somebody what they're doing there. That's not what we do. That's not part of our program. We relate to each other's feelings. We encourage newcomers to get involved in service, and it doesn't matter, right? We say in our What is Narcotics Anonymous reading, regardless of age, race, sexual identity, creed, religion, or lack of religion. So let's try to live those words. I knew that I was going to die. And I knew that my family was 2 seconds away from giving up, or I felt that way, at least in my heart. And so I knew that I had to keep coming to meetings. I knew that I had to get involved in service. I knew that I had to ignore those comments. And I knew that I had to hang out with people that had what I want. And again, that was regardless of age, race, sexual identity, creed, religion, or lack of religion. I hung out with a lot of older people because that was just the makeup of the rooms. And I, got in the fold of some gentlemen that treated me a lot like their daughter, and some women that said, "Man, I've been where you've been," and, weren't close to my age, but very easily connected with me over the emotions and over the dysfunctional home life, and had a desire to be of service and to show me that we could do this a day at a time. So I'm really grateful for the people that taught me how to make sure my audio and visual matched when I first got clean, and continue to do so now. Some of those folks are not around anymore, and unfortunately the young crowd who was still older than me when I got here, um, a lot of them, I remember one year it was like 4 or 5 girls went out around their 21st birthday, because they quote unquote wanted a legal drink. And I remember thinking, like, but the fact that it was illegal was
The best
part of the
part.
high,
That's the
right?
best part.
Yeah. So, that didn't really phase me. And also I had a really, I really, even though I abused alcohol, I really hated alcohol because of watching, a parent abuse it. So for me, that just sounded like bullshit very clearly. And I couldn't really lie to myself about that.
Yeah, you're not the first person to tell me that they've seen other people go out on their 21st birthday because of the legal, because we make that such a big deal when we're teenagers. Like, oh, I'm going to be able to walk into a 7-Eleven and walk out with a case of beer,
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. The illegal part of it was the best part of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, so getting back to what we were talking about that spiritual awakening that you had had. Tell me what that was like, that sort of crossroads moment.
I want to start by saying everyone's bottom looks very different. And something we do different than other fellowships is we don't really focus on the bottom that much, because the truth is the bottom is when you stop digging. So I hit a bottom, but then over the next month, I continued to try to manage it, right? I tried to manage the using and do the chemistry pharmacy thing where we switch up how much we use and how often we use and what we're using
And
to,
when
yeah, so I'll fix it and I'll find the right formula, right? But there had nonetheless been a shift in my spirit. I had been caught in all the lies. School finally connected with parents, parents connected with friends, and all the lies of me acting like a functional member of society quickly fell apart within hours, after months and months of lying. And the lying became exhausting. Like at first, it was that sick, fun game. And then towards the end, it was just like, I've told so many lies, I can't keep up with them anymore. And it gave me a headache, and plus sleep deprivation never helps. So, um, basically I had gotten a call from my dad, and he's like not an angry person. And he was like, "You better fucking come home." And I was like, "Oh, shh, like this is not good." So I hung up the phone, I turned off my phone, and then I proceeded to disappear for the next 3.5 days. And I choose the word disappear on purpose because I really got so intoxicated over the next 72 hours that I barely remember anything. And that's probably for my own protection. But the few things I do remember were really unsettling. And I was waking up in different places with different people. Some I knew, some I didn't. Um, and I was essentially hiding. And, my parents didn't sleep for those 3 days. Um, and my friends were calling me, leaving messages, crying hysterically. "Katherine, please come home."
you're
Um,
missing at this point.
I
You're
was
missing.
not, and I was not a runaway. So like this was very serious, and I had swore I would never do that. And I did. And I ended up at an ex-boyfriend's house who was just somebody, again, like I swore I would never hang out with them anymore because they were a scumbag, and I hung out with them anyways. And I just couldn't keep my word in any way, shape, or form when I was getting high. And um, the cops showed up after somebody reported seeing me. And when that gentleman opened the door and was like, Catherine, and everybody like, "Who's Catherine?" And everybody like walked to the back and like left the back of the house. And I was like, wow, like these are supposedly my friends, my ride
Yeah.
or die,
My rider dies.
yeah,
Yep.
like all that. And And then that's when the cop was like, do you want to make this easier? Do you want to make this hard? And it was this relief that came over me. So I ended up saying, I don't want to make this hard. And I got in the car and I got home, and there was a bunch of family over to like try and support my parents, and everybody just started crying and, gasped very gratefully that I was like alive. And I must have looked pretty awful because nobody yelled at me, and nobody tried to hug me. They were just like, you should shower, and I was like, I should. I remember falling apart in the shower, and I remember ending up on my twin size bed in my purple teenage room and looking down at the ground, and I was crying, and my parents came in and they were like, what happened? Like, nothing can be so bad that you needed to do that. And I word vomited all over them. And I'm pretty sure they blacked out during that conversation because they heard their teenage daughter say a bunch of things they probably wish they never heard. But I felt so dirty. And I felt all this shame and guilt, sleeping with people and, stealing from my family and lying, and, my school basically asking me not to come back, and like all these different, like, I just wasn't the person that I wanted to be at all. And anytime I got close to acting that way, the fear of failure was so great. I would just self sabotage. And so I said all the things like I've basically ever done wrong and lied about. And in like the few years I was using, and at the end of it, I said, I'm just so sick and tired of being sick and tired.
One of the quintessential lines of
Right. But I had never been to a meeting at that point. So fast forward a month and a half from then, I'm sitting in treatment at an adolescent facility, and NA came in with H&I on a Sunday, and we read who is an addict. I'm still slightly paranoid from things, and
naturally.
naturally, and they read that line, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I looked around, I'm like, who is following me? And afterwards, one of the girls in that program and I started talking, and I was like, you don't understand, like, I said that, like, how do they know I said that? And she was just like, listen, dude, like, no one's following you, like, this program's been around a really long time. But like, she had expressed like her dad had gotten clean through NA, and um was like, maybe when you get out of here and when you go on pass on the weekends, you should give that fellowship a try. And it was a sense of belonging once I got over the paranoia that really I hadn't felt in such a long time. And it brought peace. And I also hadn't felt that in such a long time. But I wasn't scared for once feeling those things.
Yeah, those words are written for addicts by addicts, right? So that feeling that you encountered of being sick and tired of being sick and tired and sick, right? Is a feeling that so many of us feel but don't verbalize or vocalize prior to getting clean, right? We all can relate to that feeling of waking up and saying, "Ugh, just, I'm not going to use today. Today, it's going to be different today." And then you continue to use. And then you go to sleep that night. You're like, oh, I couldn't make it through the day. So you're not alone in having felt that before having heard the words.
Right.
But you're probably one of the few people who put the words together.
Yeah, and it's odd that I like distinctly remember saying that. And
Mhm.
I think I distinctly remember it because when it was repeated in those readings, like a month and a half later, I was like, whoa. And I think it was my higher power just pointing out, like, hey, you're not alone. Like you said, we're never alone. And there's a reason that 12 steps start with we.
1 through 12. So you make the decision to get clean. After treatment, did you say, I'm not doing this anymore?
No, I was terrified of getting high again.
Okay.
So I had not even a full day from getting home and starting a new high school. And my counselors and some of the folks that I spoke to in NA were really good about helping me prep for going back to an environment that, as you pointed out earlier, was going to have alcohol and drugs and
People, places, and things.
correct. And what someone pointed out to me that really sticks out till this day is you are going to see all these different people, but they are probably the same people with different faces.
Mm.
So I
They're
had
not
that,
new.
right. I had that knowledge going in, and this was a preparatory school, and I had been in public school my whole life, and we had to wear uniforms, but I could still see the cliques, and I could see who the football players were, and the pretty hot girls were, and the academically um,
Inclined.
thriving were, right? And the people who floated between. And I was always kind of a floater, which is not abnormal. A lot of addicts tend to be chameleons, and I don't think I think it's a survival thing, but I also think it's a not truly knowing or being comfortable with self, and or just having a lot of interest, right? So
And being able to mask too to fit in.
correct. And I very quickly saw who I was getting attracted to. And as soon as I realized, oh, I want to hang out with this group, I walked in the opposite direction because I knew if I wanted to hang out with them, it was probably because they were doing the wrong thing. And I saw them smoking cigarettes after school. And, so I tried to hang out with some people that were quiet and studying at lunch and just doing things different, right? Just taking the risk, the healthy risk of doing things different.
And were you actively, after having left treatment, were you actively going to meetings?
Yes. So I followed the H&I suggestion of getting to a meeting, not the day I got out because it was 10:30 p.m. when I got out, but the next day. And I was very fortunate. My parents would drive me around to meetings, and whether it was Friday night at 8 o'clock or 9:30 in the morning, they would take me to meetings and wait in their car in the parking lot. And sometimes my dad would bring a pillow and a blanket because it was like a midnight meeting on Saturday, and he was exhausted, but he never, and my mother never once said, "We're too tired to take you."
That's another thing about getting clean early on is that you don't have access to transportation, right? So a lot of people's early recovery is enabled by their parents or their support system, right? Being able to pick them up and take them to meetings.
Yeah. Especially because, like, I should have been doing driver's ed when I was cutting class and getting high. And, if you're an adult listening to this stuff, you're like, ha ha ha, that's funny. But, like, as a kid, that was just another thing that made me realize and hate, like, all my friends are moving forward and I'm
Mm.
not.
Yeah, you're stuck in a place trying to build back the things that you lost while you were getting high and,
Yeah.
sabotaging your life.
And then having this fear of what happens if I become independent and no one's watching and I'm not accountable and I mess up again. Because again, I had a really, really healthy fear of doing drugs again.
I think that's important, right? Adding to the conversation of how many times young people have heard, like, are you sure you're not done? Some people weren't scared straight until they were, losing their house and their kids and their, like,
Yeah,
because they didn't have responsibilities back then, right? They didn't have a mortgage to pay, they didn't have a car payment, they didn't have a career, they didn't, X, Y, and Z. But knowing that you don't have to have those things, have that coming to God moment and the process of surrender is also very powerful, in my opinion, to be able to say, I have had enough. I don't need to see how much worse this can get, right?
for sure. And I think when you're younger, your world is smaller. And even though it's your world and it feels really big, and it feels really important. It feels like nothing else is going on. That's not just an addict thing, that's like a general teenage thing, I
Mm-hmm.
think. It was really important for me to know and learn about what a spiritual bottom is. And I've seen people come in older and say, I've had a job this whole time. I don't have DWIs, right? My kids are doing great. My marriage is pretty good. So if I'm looking strictly for material breakdown to push me to get clean or have that be the sign from my higher power that I need help, that might not exist
Right.
because maybe I'm really good at keeping a job and showing up on time. But
Hiding.
but maybe I'm right drinking in the closet every night, right? So for me, I was doing good until I wasn't. I was keeping up my grades. I was doing, going to school. I wasn't missing anything. Like, so, I would say, and this is going to sound really bananas to some people, but like, I would say there were moments where I questioned, do I really have a problem? And I feel like it took me forever to get clean.
How long were you using prior to getting clean?
So I grew up in a European household. So we had alcohol with dinner since we're like five.
Yeah, we
And
don't
it,
have,
yeah, like I
drinking ages in
never,
our
yeah, it
cultures.
was, my dad's Greek, my mom's Spaniard. We don't abuse wine, right?
It's part of our communion in
Yeah,
church,
exactly. So, you
which you
know,
receive like when you're months old sometimes.
exactly. So, it wasn't, I never really looked at, and this is, I think, something everyone can relate to no matter what age you get clean. Alcohol. Oh, alcohol is not a drug. Haha, just kidding. It's definitely a
Alcohol is
drug.
most
It
definitely a
is
drug.
actually one of the biggest
The
drugs.
gateway drug.
And yeah, and, we came from Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, right? So that tells us how significant of a problem alcohol abuse is in the United States. So, um, I had not really processed that that was something I would end up abusing or even considered abusing. And it took me a while in rehab to look back and be like, oh, I did abuse alcohol. Because, whoops, because anytime I couldn't get the stuff that I wanted to get, I was in my parents' liquor cabinet and, drinking straight like liquor because whatever got me messed up faster. And I remember people when I would walk around my town drinking like a classy broad, being like, you don't have orange juice with that or something, like, and I was just like, no, why would I waste it? Like if that's not a sign. So yeah, I had, I would say actively, intentionally started using at 12 years old. And my first night drinking with friends, um, I just told this story very recently. I got a 40 of OE, sat behind a bodega because, classy, again, really
Right.
classy.
Real class.
And I drank it, I vomited, drank more, vomited, got pizza, and then finished the second bottle. And I remember distinctly the girl I was with being like, you don't have to finish both. And at that point, day one of intentionally using, I'm like, why would I waste it?
Right. You may be an addict.
And the fact that I like ate and then kept drinking and then threw it up again, like, like, yeah, that sounds really normal. And
Mm.
like, that's not, there's a difference between experimenting and that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess in total it would have been about 4.5 years of using, which in retrospect doesn't sound like a lot. But when I think about how starved my spirit was, and when I think about the self hatred and the shame and the chaos I caused in that time frame,
Can you imagine if it was more? Oh my
I
God.
try not to.
That's insane. The fact that you've gone 4 times the amount of time is a miracle, right? And then some. So you get clean, you're a teenager going into your 20s. At some point, you get to college age, right? And what do college kids do best? Get real fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the culture of college, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you say was the thing that kept you clean while you were in these types of environments where I'm sure all of your friends were using in some form of another?
Yeah. So being, again, really intentional about who I surrounded myself with, which was really hard. It was actually more difficult in college than in high school, which is interesting because college, you have this wider, because I didn't dorm anywhere because my parents were like, you are not trusted alone. And I was like, correct, you should not trust me alone. I knew if I went away to college, I would fuck up. And I knew if I went too far from home, I would, have difficulty rebuilding a network and a fellowship. So, also, I had been away for 15 months, right? From 16 to 17 and a half. So, thinking about that, like nobody, no kid really wants to go away, or you think you do when you're that age. You're like, I want to leave my house for a year and a half, but
You
like
don't.
it's, yeah, and also going to rehab is not exactly like the highlight, right? So I
It's
went
not
to,
a welcomed
yeah, it
thing.
wasn't a vacation. So I went to Queens College, and I was extremely overwhelmed, and anxiety started to hit, and my mental illness, depression was not managed well. And I was very, very lucky. I had a one friend from high school that I saw. I had a friend from my old high school that I saw, and they both happened to be really great women that were not constantly getting messed up. They really didn't have any interest in getting messed up. They weren't those experimenting 20 something year olds. And very quickly, I made friends that were not from that category. And it was, I really still this day feel like God put, and three out of those four women that I met around that time are still in my life today. Um, I think God really placed those people in my life because it showed me, you have this theory, and this, it's a very like accepted cultural context, or concept rather, that, oh, well, everybody's getting messed up at that age. And that's actually not true.
Hmm.
So I wasn't getting messed up. And then I met women that weren't getting messed up. And I told them I was, in recovery, and I couldn't drink and I couldn't smoke. And yes, I'm smoking cigarettes, but even that I need to quit, and they were like, okay. And we would go out to dinner or go out to bars and shoot pool and stuff. And I'd be like, you guys can drink, like I'll drive. Cause at that point I did get a license, and they were like, Catherine, we don't want to drink tonight. And I just like couldn't fathom. I'm like, what do you mean? You're allowed. Like, just do it. And they were like, it's illegal. And I was like, I'm not hearing your point. So I was really, I'm very grateful for the influence of them. And they taught me, they were people outside of NA who taught me you can have fun and not be messed up. And that was still a foreign concept at that point.
Normies, as we call them, people
Yes.
outside of the
The
friendship,
earthlings.
the
Yes.
Earthlings. So you arrive then at your 21st birthday,
Hmm.
and so how do you resist that urge, right, to just go out like some of your friends did?
Yeah. So I love dancing, and I really, people joke around like, oh, Catherine's high on life when they like see me at a party. People specifically that are not in recovery are like, you what do you mean you don't drink? You seem
Same.
so
Can
like,
can relate. I'm a
yeah.
party all by myself, honey.
Right.
I don't
I'm
need the
like,
liquor.
I think, a lot of it is like, I never thought I'd have these opportunities to socialize and travel the way I do. So like when I'm there, I'm genuinely excited. And the things that used to bother me before, like, do I look okay? And the insecurities, and the, am I going to meet a boy? And like, but all the like, all the stuff that really doesn't build character, I would say, actually just tears down my character, became less of a focus when I realized I like shouldn't even be alive, right? So going out and celebrating life, I want to be very, very clear about this. I don't, I didn't then, and I still don't now. I don't go out to places that have an excessive amount of alcohol if I am in a bad headspace. My sponsor and network always knows when I'm going out. Um, I always have an exit strategy, and the friends I'm with truly, truly respect my recovery, have been to my anniversaries, and they test my drinks. And some people decide in recovery to never go to a club and never go to a pool hall, and don't even go to weddings if they know there's going to be a lot of alcohol. I think part of the bridge back to life that our literature talks about is learning how to maneuver in society in a way that allows you to have fun and not be hyper fixated on the things you can't do, and more focused on enjoying yourself with the things you can do. And I don't stay at the club for 6 hours, but I go and I dance for 3 hours. I sweat a lot. I leave stinking, laughing, smiling, and get home and go to bed, so like after a shower. So like my girlfriends took me out. I wanted to get dressed up. I wanted to go dancing. And we all agreed we were not going to announce it was my 21st birthday. So we wouldn't have drinks sent to us over and
Shots.
over and
Yeah,
over
yeah.
again, right? So very like intentional, very prepared.
Mindful.
And all of them, again, people in and out of recovery were like, hey, if at any point this feels like too much, we leave
Mm-hmm.
and we go and watch movies and eat a crap ton of popcorn. So we went out to a club in Astoria. We danced, we laughed, we got hit on by weirdos, and we had a really fun night. And I would say maybe for 2 seconds that night, I was like, but I'm 21. And then I had that realization of, Katherine, every time you drank, you pretty much blacked out. So
Let's not.
tomorrow, you're actually going to remember this. And that felt really good.
Yeah, like I think filling your life with those types of moments of joy that don't need alcohol or any other drug to, validate it and make it a fun time
Yeah.
is, like you said, intentionally doing that. So you go through your 20s and into your 30s and you're in recovery and you're now steadfast in that decision. Take me to present day Katherine. Take me to, being a career woman and doing service in the fellowship and sponsoring women and men and being a sponsee. Take me through that journey and how being a teenager has really, being a teenager at the time when you decided to surrender has cemented your recovery.
So I mentioned earlier there's a difference between abstinence and recovery, and sometimes I've been in abstinence and not recovery. The difference for me is being in step work and actively working on myself and implementing spiritual principles and not. And because I was a teenager and because I got clean really young and because I did 15 months in an institution, when I first got out, I thought I have done all the therapy I can possibly do. F this step working guide. I don't need to be asked the same question 4 different ways. And I was very rebellious to doing more work because I thought I had done all the work I could possibly do, which again feels very teenagery in
The work is
retrospect.
done. What do you mean?
Yeah, I
I'm
was like, I'm
recovered.
not growing anymore. This is it. I've arrived.
I am
So
recovered,
yeah.
period.
So my first 4 years of recovery were messy with character defects, and that is a rite of passage. But also it is recognition of how I do step work now. So I was abstinent, I would say, my first 4 years. The main thing was I went to meetings, I did service. That helped keep me clean. I never stopped making meetings. I've never at one point said I'm not going to Narcotics Anonymous anymore. I did get professional help outside as well, and our literature talks about sometimes that being necessary to seek outside help, and that is part of my toolbox
For mental health
for mental
purposes.
health, mental illness. Yeah. And I recognize part of my using was, chemical imbalance, and I made it worse with using, shocker. And so fast forward to, I would say, mid 20s, I found myself in fetal position, clean, very much like the really bad nights of getting high and asking myself why I was alive because I was miserable. And I was still learning that feelings pass.
Getting clean doesn't make you immune from feeling the feelings.
Correct. And it doesn't make us immune from life on life's terms, feeling painful. So I wasn't where I wanted to be. I still hadn't fully accepted. If I wanted to be certain places, I had to put in effort. And we talk a lot about that in like the self-acceptance pamphlet and our triangle of self-obsession pamphlet, how like we just don't grow up the way other people do. We don't accept responsibility as quickly as other people do. And
We're not
we
as productive members.
right, and we think certain things should be handed to us, and it's not so explicit. Like I never woke up and was like, somebody should pay all my bills. Like no. But I thought like oh, you get into college and you figure out your career. Like I didn't think there was really effort behind that. I thought it was just like something that happened to you. So I really had to make a decision to either get high or get into the work. And again, I was terrified of getting high. So I got into the work, and now I am honored to say that I sponsor 6 people at this time, and that is my max. And I have a maximum because boundaries are important.
You told me 5 was your max, and now you have another sponsee, Catherine.
Yes. Yes. And I'll tell you how that happened. I also figured out max and boundaries with my commitments. Working a full time job, I'm in the mental health field. And after talking to people with a lot of time and experience, we sorted out numbers that work for my life balance because I was doing a lot of NA work and not family, romantic relationship, education. Like I wasn't doing,
Balancing.
yeah, the balance was really off. And I've noticed every time I think I find balance in recovery, like something shifts again because that's the nature of life. So the deal that I have come up with after, again, talking to my sponsor is like I'm meeting people once a month to do step work. If people miss that month, we're rescheduling for the next month. I'm not making it up that day or that week because I need that time back typically. Um,
And you have friends, right?
I have friends. I
You have
have
a
a
romantic, yeah,
pepperoni
yeah.
that needs my undivided attention,
You have
and
romantic partners. You have an
I
outside
want to
life.
travel more. Yeah, and I need also stillness. I realize the need for stillness is I need it now more than ever because of how fast paced life can be, and um, the hustle culture of New York and the states in general, and
The New York state of mind.
yeah, yeah. And, if you don't have 5 jobs and you're not making money all the time, like you're not worth anything, moving away from that.
And the boss, the boss bitch culture, right? Like, oh, you're a boss,
Right,
you're running things, you're doing things.
right.
That need for stillness is so important. I'm so glad that you highlighted that.
Yeah, the recharge of my battery is what makes me able to be a bad bitch when I
Hmm.
want to. So
Being a bad bitch is a choice, okay? Sometimes
it
I
is.
need to be a
And
resting bitch.
yeah, sometimes I need to be a robe bitch on my couch.
A bubble bath bitch.
We could just keep going with the alliteration for the rest of the podcast. But yeah, so I found myself thriving in a lot of areas. The 2 places I struggled with the most was pursuing education, a higher level, and romantic relationships. I really had a difficult time applying third step in both of those areas, and in God's time, those things happened, and they happened in God's time when I finally practiced a third step. God
Making the
had
decision to turn your will and your life over.
Correct. God had given me plenty of signs where I should make a left or a right or go straight. And I was like, I got the map. We're fine.
Explicitly ignoring turn left. How
Yeah.
about not?
Yeah. I was like, I know the shortcut, right? I am the ways. No. So I struggled, with my defects coming up, and I at first had to get over um the trust thing, and trust is earned, and um, learning to trust myself in order to trust others, that took a long time. And seeing relationships modeled that were healthy are is something I still lack. So I had to seek those out to learn what to do and not do. Um, that developed in friendships for me, and then eventually in romance. Um, it took me 10 years to do all my first 12 steps, and I share that as a do not sign, not as an encouragement. Take your time. Everyone has their own process. Sure, don't rush through the steps. Sure, don't take 10 years to do the steps.
Yeah, get them done.
Yeah. And we did step work, then tradition work. And then we started going through the step working guide. So the first time we did it was different. I've been with the same sponsor for almost 15 years now.
Amazing. I love your sponsor. Such a good woman.
Yes. And she has things I want.
Hmm.
She has a really strong set of values and her actions match it more than not.
Talk
And
about
that
a
is
boss
what I
bitch.
strive.
Talk about a
Yes.
boss bitch.
Yes. And I respect her tremendously. Our relationship has helped heal a lot of wounds. And she's taught me how to be a sister in recovery, you know, and I really, really enjoy the relationship I have with women in my network. And you mentioned I sponsor a male, and I just want to point out he is not a heterosexual male. And that was with approval from my sponsor and grand sponsor. Like I talked about it with people first because I was taught when I first got clean, a man can't help you be a woman can't help you be a man. And I know that's like very gender roley and binary terms, but I really just want to point out like who I want around me to help me be a better person and what that looks like and who can relate to me the most does happen to be people of the same sex. So, um, I wasn't going to find my self esteem in a dude's pants.
Right.
And that took me a minute to learn. Um, and to learn the difference between love and lust.
Trial and
Um,
error.
yes, that's a nice way to put it.
Trial and error. I'm a
We'll go with
scientist.
that.
I'm a scientist.
Yeah,
It's called the
and
scientific method.
yeah, and just recognizing that my self-worth had to come from doing actions that were challenging and not always the easy thing. So when I accepted that like I could do hard things and not explode
Hmm.
and that I could cry and not disintegrate, you know, that's when I saw other women go back to school and get masters and who had the same story of me, you know, barely graduating high school and you know, being a teenage menace and you know, then going back to college and getting 3.8s and 4.0s and I ended up back at college pursuing eventually something I love and
And an advanced degree.
yeah, getting my master's degree in 2022. And I reach out sometimes to the people at the facility I was at freaking 20 years ago and thank them and let them know I'm still clean because I think it's really important to recognize the people who help at the beginning because they're so influential in the foundation that I have. Um, and now I have the ability to help others in a professional way as well as in a non-professional way. And I I want to say like life is not perfect. I actually have to consciously strive to not stay in that fantasy of I want everything to be perfect because perfection doesn't exist and control doesn't exist, even though I like to think it does. I really just try to live by the spiritual principles a day at a time. Sometimes it's a moment at a time. I try to ask for help on a regular basis and remember that I don't need to know it all. I try to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And that is mostly influenced by the people around me who keep me accountable because I can't tell a sponsee, hey, I think you should get a home group and not have one. I can't tell a sponsee, share when you don't want to share and then
Not
not
raise,
talk
yeah, not
when
raise your
I
hand.
feel you know, uncomfortable emotions. I can't tell people to do service and then sit in the back of the room and talk the whole business meeting. I really just I want to be somebody that I can look in the mirror and be proud of. I want to be an example to my niece and nephew and to newcomers. My niece and nephew are newcomers to my family. Um, I want to be the person that people talk about behind my back in a good way.
Yep.
So I think I do a pretty good job of that based on the tools I have at my disposal. And, you know, the biggest component of that really is the belief in a higher power.
Well, having met you as a newcomer to give you an official performance review, you're doing stellar in all of those places.
How my last boss that.
Fuck them. I will say I so appreciate your sharing your story with us and your friendship, just being there for me and being that example for the newcomer and for giving this really unique perspective of what it was like to get clean early and remain steadfast in that decision, and how your life has not been immune from challenges, and how you are still in recovery. You're still recovering, right? You're still a recovering addict, and we all have those tendencies of wanting perfection and wanting to do everything our way and control, and those are just manifestations of the same disease. And thank God we have a program and a fellowship that helps us work on ourselves and lean on each other when we're not strong enough to do so. So thank you for being that for me. And thank you for being that for so many people and for sharing your story with us today. I really love you and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and good luck with your continued podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
The Voices of Recovery podcast is an independent production of the Works of Wisdom. We welcome your questions and donations via PayPal at voicesofrecoverypod@gmail.com. This podcast is an independent production and is not affiliated with, associated with, authorized by, endorsed by, or in any way officially connected with Narcotics Anonymous or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. While NA literature may be read during episodes for the purpose of supporting recovery, such use does not constitute an official endorsement or representation by Narcotics Anonymous. In accordance with NA tradition, the NA name is not to be used to endorse or be affiliated with any outside enterprise, and no such endorsement or affiliation is implied. Music is by Sage. Thanks for listening to the Voices of Recovery podcast.